July, Monday, July 4th. Alright, so my wife gave me this journal to write something when I was in the hospital for twisting my ankle by accident. Let me tell you, I am not happy of what's currently going on. I'm Frank Heffley, the father of two sons. Used to be three, though, which I'll get to that later. Right now I'm dealing with the doctor, and when I'm in the car, I'll write all about it on my way home. I explained to the doctor that I was trying to catch up to someone who tried to mess with me and I tripped at the curb as a result. The doctor told me to watch where I was going next time and not to go after the perpetrator. Instead, I should call the police. The police? How could I report someone who has changed his gender? That's exactly what happened to my third son and why I've chased him. Greg, you sincerely disappointed me. Writing this down, maybe I should start somewhere from the beginning on why I tried to make Greg into not only preparing for his future in terms of education, but understanding on what it's like to be a man in real life and how he should properly deal with problems when anything comes in his way. It makes sense to have my thoughts organized in writing after all, so I can plan out the solution. It all started from a few months ago when one of my co-workers, Hector, had told me that the boss would at least like to know more about my life. I was worried. So worried that my kids didn't have a very bright future ahead of them. I'm very disappointed in how our sons turned out to be. That isn't the way that Susan and I raised them at all. Let's start with the eldest son of mine, Rodrick. I don't like his poor attitude towards life. You see, my eldest son doesn't plan on going to college, posts his photos online that won't get him hired, and doesn't clean himself up. My son is a drummer, but he's not playing it for everyone. He manages to just attract boys his age, and the genre that they're playing as heavy metal is terrible in my opinion. Rodrick even got a lead singer who's 35 years old, doesn't have a job, and still lives with his parents who couldn't afford to retire. This is who Rodrick is, a terrible son that I wish I could have raised him better. Another son of mine is Greg. I can't believe that Greg doesn't really realize his full potential. First, he decided to ruin a stage play of The Wizard of Oz. Second, he doesn't make the cut to the talent show at all. Third, he doesn't play soccer very well, and I've been laughed at by my boss. I signed him up to Spag Union just so he can at least have some skills for the rest of his life. But now, he passed away from the conflict in Afghanistan, thanks to that now corrupt organization. Now accept it as his fate, as I'm sad at the loss of one of my sons. Finally, I have the youngest son of mine that Susan and I raised him differently from the previous two, Manny. First, I've allowed him to sleep in our bed between Susan and I because the two of us haven't felt like doing something fun in our bed for the last 4 to 5 years, and this idea with Manny does keep us together for a while. Second, Manny seems to be more honest than my two sons combined. When Manny reported that Greg threw up out the window, it's a miracle that we have him because we can't be honest with Manny.
Bobby Fold walk at big window.
However, Manny does have his own issues that stand out from the two that's arguably worse than what my other two sons are doing. When he goes to preschool, at first, he's afraid of people, then he gets into trouble, and finally, I've had to deal with Manny destroying my Civil War set. Oh, Manny! As a result, we had to send Manny to private preschool where he can at least get some personalized learning. Susan and I would have to send him to private school for the rest of his childhood. Hope that at least he could be a better son than Rodrick and Greg will ever be. And then there's my wife, Susan Heffley. We've met each other at the same school that Greg is currently attending, Westmore Middle School. I met her at the time when Susan have played for the basketball Huskies team. I liked her athleticism, and so we've talked for a bit before we were able to hit it off. For a while, it worked out great. We've even got a photo at one point during the time that we have kissed at a photo booth in Tall Pines shopping mall. We were together for so long that at one point after finishing high school, we were married. We went to Ala de Corral as part of our honeymoon, and years later, we got Rodrick, Greg, and Manny. However, almost 2 decades go by. Things have changed a lot, and our relationship has definitely started to deteriorate as soon as Manny has come into existence to our lifestyle. The way we've raised our children had taught us about some of the differences that become slowly irreconcilable as the years went on. At first, when we cared for Rodrick and Greg, the gap between them is about 4 years. It's clear that our value of parenting the kids weren't too different from what we've previously learned beforehand, with Rodrick being an example. However, the gap between Greg and Manny is 9 years apart. And that's where the previous experiences from raising Rodrick and Greg differs completely between me and my wife. For me, I would prefer to try to raise Manny in a similar way on how Rodrick and Greg were raised in the old days. The difference here is that I avoid giving harsh punishments to Manny like my previous boys have earned, and in exchange, I'd hoped that Manny would really do good at school thanks to parental guides that I've read with my wife for many years now. My wife, on the other hand, had a very different interpretation from all the parenting guides that we read together. Back then, it was simple. I remember that my wife pulled Roderick's pacifier out of his mouth when he got older and put it in Greg's mouth. It was a good idea at the time since we didn't have enough money to get newer materials back then. Nowadays, Manny has to have his own pacifier, thanks to the fact that sharing or reusing material from a previous child could harm development. Bet that's what happened to Greg when he had to use Roderick's material back then. He's always feeling quite inferior compared to Rodrick. And Manny. You know, what's even worse? My wife believed that Roderick's girlfriend is actually Greg Heffley being transformed into a girl. I bet that it has something to do with her friend named Annette back in the day. Oh, it's probably like the female version of Albert Stanley in their day. I don't mean to be bashing at one of her friends, but my wife has recently gone to a salon where Annette has worked at. I avoid going in there out of concerns regarding her conspiracy theories being spread around. This is when I recently started to argue with my wife that the girl named Greta is not a son, because Annette probably makes her believe in something like that. But my wife claimed that the reason why Greta is actually our son is because she hangs out with Riley more often than her supposed boyfriend, Rodrick, had called to the Hills family, remembering the fact that Greg has shown some interest in her. And the fact that Greta stole some of my wife's clothes out of the closet, thinking that she must have got used to wearing it, like the old days when we had Greg Heffley around back then, is when we really lived in a small apartment. I find this to be ludicrous coming out of my wife's mouth. Greta is not Greg, Susan. Are you out of your mind? Frank, come on. I've seen it and believe that Greta is really Greg. I argue against it, thinking that it's ridiculous that Greta is actually Greg. I say that Greta doesn't really live in our house. Greta's from Rhode Island when I've interacted with her, and the fact that at one point Greta has better experience of carrying a dog while Greg doesn't. I don't know if that's supposed to say Karen or not, but yeah. Our arguments didn't go anywhere until tonight. When Greta entered the bikini contest, that's when I realized Greta's body looked really similar to Greg. I've seen Greg when he's in the swim team. His body had magically, somehow, turned into an actual girl. My life is about to be completely ruined by Greta. I was livid after the contest was over. I tried to demand my wife and Riley to leave the place immediately since I'm not in the mood to stay. But my wife isn't budging, forcing me to talk to Greta, which I've sort of despised her now since she showed the body that really looked like Greg's. Except now her private parts have actually turned Greg into a girl. I've attempted to confront her, but she froze up to me. I had to take out the belt to teach her a lesson about proper manners when I realized that Greta isn't any better than Greg. As a result, I've chased that wimpy kid, but I tripped on the curb with my pants down. Say cheese, Frank. Oh, yes, it really happened. If you think I should draw myself with my pants down, please go see a doctor and get help. What's worse is that Mr. Sneller got his camcorder ready for any humor that he and his son could laugh at. I was recording on tape and I was not in a good mood. The last time I've met them, I hate the idea of performing in front of the people and have to make a complete fool of myself in front of the entire neighborhood. This is just so that the Snellers family could win up to $10,000 grand prize for America's funniest families at the cost of my reputation in the neighborhood, going down the drain facing them putting laxatives and the cake. I couldn't forgive them on what they've done to me. Speaking of pain, my ankle still hurts. I should probably rest up for tomorrow since the doctor had told me that as long as I wasn't doing anything else that's rough, I should be fine for at least a few days. Well, we've arrived home and I should stop writing this now since I need to take a good night's rest for tomorrow. Hope I could resolve my reputational issues not only in the neighborhood, but everywhere else in Playview soon.